It's usually. All right. Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Ruth. Okay. Yeah. So you could either escape or you could say, I'm going to sort this out. I'm going to try and figure out a solution to the palaver that we're dealing with as a country, as a continent, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing that I've shared often with people, most of which are on this call at different points, is the national pledge of one of the countries in Africa, Nigeria, and some of the things that are listed in it and how we often say it and not pay very keen attention to what it's on the pledge. So we say we pledge to Nigeria, and I believe I don't know what the pledges or the anthems or what the various statements of allegiance is in various other countries in Africa, but using Nigeria as an example, usually you say I pledge to Nigeria, my country, to be faithful, loyal, and honest. So there are a few things that we talk about, one of which is being faithful, um, being loyal, um, being honest. Now, these is something, I mean, it's the very first thing that we say when we start saying the pledge. The very next thing that we say is to serve, all right? To serve Nigeria with all my strength. So that's another thing, to serve. Um, but I don't know whether that is the focus or that's the drive of every African or every Nigerian. And then the next is to defend her unity. And the last part of it is to uphold her honor and glory. And we say, so help me God. Yeah. Now, these various things that we state when we say the pledge: faithfulness, loyalty, honesty, service, defend her unity, upholding her honor and her glory, are the very values which would make for the greatness of any nation around the world. Any nation around the world where the citizenry, the leadership, the people who are steering the affairs of the nation are faithful, are loyal, have a great sense of patriotism, are honest, have a sense of service and not to be served. A great speech that we always, well, I don't know whether we always do that, but there's a lot of reference to John Kennedy's speech where he says, "Seek not for what your country may do for you, but seek what you may do for your country." That again is the spirit of service, and people hinge on that idea of service and say that is really what makes for the greatness of any country, any nation, any continent. So we say to serve, and to serve with all our strength, and strength is a proverbial strength, not just with our might, in terms of our physical might in the sense, but also the might of our minds, the creative bits of our minds. I mean, one of the biggest challenges we have in the world today is that the world is faced with a lot of lazy thinkers. Gary, could you please be admitting people into the room and don't have people waiting? So I don't, yeah. So that's one, you know, uh, the might of our mind. So not just to serve with all our strength, but strength in terms of our physical strength, whichever ways we could do that, but also the might of our mind, the strength of our minds, being strong thinking people, challenging the status quo and thinking of ways to make things great. And so you find that loads of people in the world today that make a majority of the masses are lazy thinkers. They're not people that engage their minds and thoughts in ways to challenge a problem. And that is the trajectory of our discussion today, because we're looking at policy design and implementation. The whole idea of design and policy for change requires us to start with investigating what the status quo is and not just going for the nearest solution, but critically thinking and engaging our minds in ways that we have not engaged our minds in the past, for the sake of getting people involved in what we do, and getting the change that we're looking for. So that's one other thing. So critical thinking. Um, and when we look at all of these things, serve with all our might, defend our unity, and that is a big discussion in Africa today, whether we should be, there's the whole school of thought about a Pan-African roadmap for the African Renaissance, which personally I may say I align to. um, the strength of the continent working together as one would be such a huge challenge to the status quo, and would really make for the good of all the citizens and the African continent. So thinking from that standpoint, I know this is a Nigerian pledge, but I think it's transferable across board, looking at Africa as a whole. So I'm looking at that about defending on unity. And then the last, which is really huge, is upholding her honor and her glory. Having a sense of excellence, having a sense of integrity, character, honor. These are the things that, I mean, with those things that we pledge, I mean, those are promises that we make to the country, and those are debts that we owe as people. And it becomes often like a recitation, not much different than loads of the prayers we pray in the churches, which seem like recitation, and you are done with the service and you go on with the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, and so on and so forth. And people do not think of the content of the import of those statements. And it becomes, we say them sort of mindlessly and not thinking of the gravity of the words that we are speaking. And so it's the same. I'm just inviting everybody on this call to revisit the pledge as we engage with the whole concept of policy design and implementation. Engage from the standpoint of, I'm not just going to mindlessly look at the problems in Nigeria, mindlessly prefer a solution, and mindlessly watch it not work, and then start the entire vicious circle again. So let's do something that could actually make a difference. I'm going to share my screen now, and then we go on with some of the things. It's going to be a bit practical, not as, I don't know how your previous meetings have been, but this is a little bit more technical and less anecdotal. It's more, looking at it from a practical viewpoint. So we're looking at policy design and implementation. Okay, so let's start for a second. Just give me a minute. Okay, so let's start from the basic. All right, the starting point of understanding what is policy, or what is the roadmap. Let me just paint a picture of the roadmap of our discussion today. So we're going to be looking at policies as a tool for change. So we're looking at the challenges that we have generally around the world, and particularly in Africa, in Nigeria, and many of the countries in Africa. And we're thinking of change. I mean, a lot of times people give their votes to, to any particular candidate that is promising change. And oftentimes say, oh yeah, it's change. I mean, the current government we have at the minute uh, in Nigeria came on the promise of change. When the Obama administration came in, it was also on the promise of change. And you find that change is somewhat of a double-edged sword. So people are adverse to change, do not want change, and people are attracted to change at the same time. So change is a very interesting thing. But then it's important to find out what kind of change are you interested in. Is it change for the better and change for, or change for the worse? And if it's change for the better, what does that look like? What do you mean change? So we're going to see, first of all, understand the concept of policy and understand the concept of change. Understand why are we interested in change and what exactly needs to change. All right, why are we interested in change? And that now goes to something a little bit philosophical. And for those of you who've engaged in any philosophical discipline or study, in looking at human theories and behavioral patterns, then we'll delve into some of those kind of things and try to understand why it's important to think from that standpoint as well when you're looking at when you're considering the whole idea of change. What is your normative framework? So that's one thing we'll be looking at. And then looking at what needs to change. Now, this is the part where I said initially, when we say to serve with all our strength, and I was talking about the might of the mind. And in relation to the might of the mind, I'm demanding that people are able to engage their thoughts, engage their minds, engage their thinking, and providing the change that is needed. So for you to be able to effect change, you have to have a clear understanding of what the status quo is in the first place. What exactly is the status quo? What are you looking to change? Why does it need to change? Does it need to change? Is the status quo better than what could be? And lots of people would argue that a lot of times the change that have come have proven to be worse than the status quo that was. So when we say we want change, what do we mean by change, and what exactly needs to change? And then let's say that there is a need to change something. So how do we design policy? What is the role of policy in actually, actualizing this change? So how do we facilitate the change? And how do we make the policy? So a lot of times ideas are good, plans are great. But if the plans have to work, how many of you have seen a map? You get in a car, you see your satellite navigator. It's got details. There's such precision as to the destination and the route to the destination. There's such precision. But no matter how precise the map is, no matter how clear the map is, no matter how great the details are, in terms of the details of the map, it never takes any person to their destination without the person actually making a move. So we can come up with a policy, great policy, but how are we going to implement it? No matter how great the policy is, it's not worth the ink and the paper on which it is written if there is no strategic steps taken to actually effect the change. So how do we strategically align our design process in a way that would make implementation possible? So that has to start from the beginning. So when we're talking of change, when we are preferring change or a design for change or a policy that would be an effective tool for change, when we're coming up with all of those things, the first thing you want to put in your mind is, would it work? How can it work? What are the unintended consequences of this design? And so on and so forth. So how do we then recommend the change? So that's really the point that we're making. Policy is really as a tool for change. Okay, so that's the gist of this. Now, understanding the concept of policies and understanding the concept of change. Let's try to understand that in a bit. Before we go on to understand that, I want to say a few things in relation to your capstone project. Now, obviously, I did say when I had the quick chat the other time on the capstone project, I mentioned that it was about identifying a problem and trying to seek out the leverage points and trying to sort it out. But let's, whatever we're saying now, you're now trying to see how you can use the tools or the examples that I'm giving right now to deliver on the project that you're going to be writing, which I believe would be the first step in a policy design. Okay, now what is effective change? Now, for change to be effective or sustainable, the entire process from when it is conceived to when it is completed must have a few ingredients, and these are intentionality, consistency, and fidelity. Now, for you to be able to effect change from conception to completion, you must each of this process has to have intentionality, consistency, and fidelity. Now, in relation to intentionality, you have to start with why. It's no coincidence that the book I'm currently reading with a team of friends is called "Start with Why" by Simon Sinek, and it's essentially talking about finding out what the purpose is of any person, organization, country in the first place. So why, and what's the purpose of any project? What's the purpose of this change? Start with why. And this is the place where it demands your thinking to be active, and this is no playing ground for lazy thinkers. If you're a lazy thinker, if you're one that is not able to engage your mind and challenge the status quo, first to understand, and then to see, and then to anticipate something different, then you cannot really engage in the whole issue of intentionality. The next thing is consistency. Now, there is always a battle between intensity and consistency, and you have to, if you should sway on any side, I would any day prefer consistency over intensity. Um, uh, Being consistent determines demands that you focus on your direction rather than your destination. Focus on your immediate decisions rather than your long-term goals. I'm not saying the goals are not important. I'm not saying the change you want to make is not correct, it's not good. All that is great, but what are you doing on a daily basis to actually affect that change? And so there is the intensity you might want to, and this is a challenge we've had a lot in Africa. We want a quick fix. We want something that would happen immediately. We want to come up with some fantastic policy and then come up with a change and solve the whole problem. How can we in one day eradicate the entire impoverishment and poverty that bedevils loads of the places in Africa? How can we do that in one day? Is it possible? All things are possible, I believe, but I don't know if it's probable. Yeah. So consistency. Let's start by doing bits. Just get a bit done, get a little done, and then the next, get a little done, and then the next, get a little done, and then the next. I think that is more effective. And then fidelity is staying true to the plan. Whilst you stay flexible, but you must stay true to the plan. Implement as was intended. Loads of policies, great, but they were not applied with fidelity to the plan. Yeah, so that's it. So change must commence with understanding first of the status quo. Then you now start to conceive what interventions you're going to make, preparing, planning for the new actions that have been conceived, and then implementing the change plan, and then reinforcing the change by gathering, analyzing feedback, identifying gaps, managing issues, the unintended consequences, I said, and adjusting as needed, but staying, the adjustment, the flexibility should be embedded in the plan so that when you apply the plan with fidelity, it would also take into cognizance the fact that you may flip here and there within the context of the plan as a whole. So intentionality, consistency, and fidelity. So whatever you're planning, you're saying would help. So a truthful reflection on a previous status quo or the current status quo would entrench the change and make it sustainable. If you don't have a clear picture or understanding of what the challenge is, whatever change you make may not be sustainable. Because you may be preferring change that doesn't actually deal with the problem in view. Okay, so the intervention, the plans, the new actions, and their consistent repetition with fidelity are what we loosely refer to as policy. Okay, now this is not the conventional way of defining policies, but this is how I would define it. Okay, so because what exactly is policy? Um, policy is a statement of your culture. Okay, we're familiar with the term policy. All right, we're familiar with the term policies, but as you can see on the slides, they refer to a documentation of these ingredients that I've discussed earlier, right? And their prescription for how you want to run an organization. A lot of times you refer to this as a statement of culture. All right, is the document that really houses your organizational behavior and action in order to bring about change or to sustain a desired status quo. That's exactly what it is. So it's expected that the entire gamut of stakeholders in the organization follow the dictates of such a document. That document that states what your desired status quo would be and how you want to achieve it, and your behavioral pattern that would make you consistently achieve it as your reality. Then all the people that are in a part of the organization and that will be impacted by the organization one ways or the other, the entire gamut of stakeholders must follow that policy document. The document represents somewhat of a social contract that gives rights to certain rights and obligations. All right, so policy is essentially a behavioral agreement. Okay, this is the agreement. This is how we would behave. This is our culture. This is how we would intervene in this kind of situation. Procedures, on the other hand, are then the step-by-step instructions for how the policies would be achieved. So policy is a statement, it's a behavioral agreement, right? Procedures, on the other hand, are step-by-step instructions of how those policies are to be achieved. Okay, so a policy sort of defines a rule. A procedure defines who is expected to do it and how are they expected to do it. Okay, so Africa as a whole needs to sit down and revisit its behavior, its patterns, its practices, if it is to achieve the renaissance that we're trying to look at. All right, so this is the issue of policy and power policy, because like I said, it is what you do, focusing on what you do on a daily basis. I give you an illustration I picked up from a book. The writer, it's a book by James Clear. It's called Atomic Habits, and the writer gave an illustration about if you were leaving, traveling from, say, Los Angeles, for instance, and traveling all the way to New York. If the pilot shifted the rudder on the plane that determines its route by just a degree, when the flight leaves Los Angeles, just by that tiny change in direction, even though the goal was New York, that plane would land in DC. So you see that a slight change in your direction could impact on your destination. So we could be focusing on an Africa of our dreams, but what's most important are what policies do we have in place to sort of describe our daily behavioral patterns in order to achieve our long-term goals. All right, so we do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems, our policies, our procedures. So if our procedures are such that the trajectory of our procedures will lead us to our goals, and that's important. So let's put a pin on our goals, our dreams, our hopes for Nigeria, our hopes for Africa, our hopes for Ghana. Let's put a pin on it and let's focus on our daily decisions. Yeah, I'll give one last illustration before I move on to the next slide. A professor in Florida was is an art class, and he divided his class into two at the beginning of the semester, and he said to the group A, I'm going to grade you based on your quantity. the quantity of artwork you're able to produce. Group B, I'm going to grade you based on the quality of artwork that you produce. And so group A, you're just supposed to produce as many artwork as possible. If you're able to produce 100 artwork, you get an A, 80 artwork, a B, 60, a C, and stuff like that. Just churn out as many artwork as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, just churn it all out. Group B, on the other hand, is produce just one artwork. Let it be perfect. Your ideal artwork. And they set out, and the semester went on. And at the end of the semester, both groups have produced their artwork. It turned out that group A, that had no mandate for quality, had far better quality than group B, that had only a mandate for quality. Now, what was the difference? It just is just a tale that really illustrates the old time saying that practice makes perfect. You don't just wait until you get that Africa of your dream. Just get doing something, no matter how little, and make mistakes as you get on. And the more you do it, the more perfect you become, and so on. But if you kill your dreams with plans, it's not going to work. All right. So I'm not saying the plans are not important. They are important. I mean, we're talking about policies and procedures, and that's a lot of planning. It is important. But I'm saying get on with it no matter what. Just still get on with it. Whereas if we're just waiting for, if our plans are to solve one huge African problem, it may not work. You know, it's possible it could work, but its probability is questionable. And that leads me to the next point, is why are we interested in change in the first place? Why are we interested in change in the first place? In relation to determining what change we want, why we're interested in it, and so on and so forth. Now, a few things I'd say to you. Number one, when we are, just put my slides to this, is when we are thinking of change, it always starts from a place where we feel irate about something, where we have a sense of anger, a sense of tiredness, being fed up with the status quo. So you have to look about yourself, look into yourself, and say first, what is it about us and our outlook of life that makes us irate about the status quo? And as a result, triggers a hunger for change. Why are we concerned? And now this is one of the biggest problems that we have in Africa. There is no clarity as to why we are concerned. And this is a clarity as to what our normative framework is. And so sometimes we want change because we see that we have it different in a different country. And so we want that. But when we go back to understanding what our makeup is, that's important. The answer to this question of why we're concerned, what are we made up of, lies to the basic understanding of our normative value, our normative framework. Now, our normative framework is what would shape our discontentment with the status quo and gives us the yearning for change, as well as then fashion the pathway to the change and the entire fabrics of the change. So change, what I'm saying is change is essentially about us than about the country. Now, the reason why I said this is one of the biggest problems, let me say for Nigeria, for instance, I mean, we see loads of politicians, and there's a tendency that I don't get the ticket in PDP and I move over to APC the next day. And I don't get a ticket in APC, I move over to another party the next day. The sense of allegiance to any party is more like which has the clearest pathway to power, rather than which one aligns with my personal ideology, which one aligns with why I'm concerned. Because the whole idea of leadership should stem from a place of service. Now, why do you want to serve? Why are you bothered? Why are you concerned? And that's why, starting with that why first, That's why understanding the reason for our quest, our discontentment for change, for the status quo, and our quest for change. That why is what should form our alliance with any political party. When this party, their approach to solving this problem fits with our makeup, our normative framework. So the first part of your assignment in terms of your capstone project is understanding and describing your normative framework. That's the first part. Okay, now let's look at a closer look at a normative framework. I'll be very quick with this. I'm not sure I can uh, go on for much longer because I do have another meeting shortly. But I don't know if Nonso and Gary, I don't know if we can spill this over a second session, so I can carry on from where I am, or I just send the slides. Is that possible? Gary,
Yeah, until it talks on that session,
I didn't hear
can you
you.
hear me, sir?
Yeah.
All right, I said we can spill it off to another session. So let's have a discourse on credit.
I didn't hear you.
I think he said that we'll space over to another session. So we'll plan for another session. You just let us know what time works for you, and then we'll work towards
Yeah,
it.
yeah, we could do it. I don't know what's planned for Saturday, but we could talk after this. But I'm gonna have to stop in a few minutes because I have another meeting shortly. But I'll just and I don't want to speed through. But one of the first part of what you need to do as an individual in the process of getting your capstone project done, the first thing is understanding what your normative framework is. What kind of society do you want to live in? Okay, now every individual would is likely to answer this question differently because, like it's on the slide, the way we see the world and how we want the world to be is really shaped by our history, our culture, our values, our exposure. So it's as our innate makeup that really births in our hearts a hunger for a different status quo or a contentment with the current status quo. It's our inherent makeup. I mean, a kid who has never seen different, has just been in a particular environment, has grown in that environment, that doesn't know that there is anything else, they would not yearn for something different. So usually our culture, our exposure, our values, and so on would is what would really shape the way we see the world and how we perceive an ideal world to be. Okay, so there are diverse and yet common perspectives of society and how it should work. Um, and so it's up to us to first, like I said, locate what our ideals, our perspectives, our value system before we start thinking of any change journey. So first things first in going on with your capstone project is, rather than deflect the problem away from yourself and blame everybody else but yourself for the situation in Africa, let us reflect and find out what is our normative framework, what are our ideals, what is our perspective, what are our value systems. Now these systems, this ideals, these perspectives is what is referred to as your normative framework. Now, and this is often influenced by several things: your history, your religion, your moral philosophy, your culture. These are the things that really shape what your values are and what your systems are. Yeah. So that's it. So whilst the normative frames could really vary across various groups and individuals, you can see, that's why I said you engage in some philosophical journey now, you would see that there is some commonalities across the variety of frames that we'll see. But where there is an abnormality is where you tend to align with everybody's normative framework, and that seems to be the case with many politicians back in Africa. Is you somehow you align with APC, and at the same time you also align with PDP, and at the same time you also align with another party. Somehow that is an anomaly. Your party and the team of people, your tribe, that you engage with in trying to fashion a change should be reflective of who you are. So it must start from first understanding who we are, what is our normative, what's our outlook to life. Now, people certainly want the same things, similar things: material, physical well-being, security from physical and economic risk, capacity to engage in the society, the desire for dignity and respect. You know, we all want different things, but our approach to getting these things and our motives for getting these things differ, and oftentimes demand the ability for us to then make trade-offs. So what are you willing to trade off for dignity or respect? You know, what I may be willing to trade off for my dignity may be different from what the next person is willing to trade off for their dignity. So it then boils down to our approach to achieving what we want as a people are different, and usually are really tied to our values, and our values often are conflicting. Yeah, so that is the thing about understanding who we are, understanding our normative frameworks, and those are the things that's um, important. So still looking at some of the dominant, I said whilst they're different, whilst they vary, there's some things, you know, philosophically you can see that there are some things that are common across board, different approaches to getting these things that we all want. So the normative frames in national and global development discourse include three main things. There are several, but there are three main ones. One is the capabilities approach. So this approach is fundamentally about expanding opportunity to live a fulfilling life across multiple dimensions. That is your approach to saying that people get what they want. So practically, this focuses on deprivations or the lack of opportunities, and translate policies to focus on rectifying these deprivations or the lack of opportunities. In other words, is trying to create equal opportunities, not necessarily equal outcomes. It's just focusing on the need to give people to perform according to their capabilities. So that's your approach to life. I don't think there should be a sense of entitlement. This country should do well if it can. Can we create a fair playing ground for everybody to do well? So that could be your political ideology. In the UK, you have the Conservatives, and you have the Labour Party, and so on, and they tend to have different ideologies. From my perception of them, I don't know, I don't speak for either of the parties, but from what I perceive, and I perceive from the Conservatives, that they are more like, let's create equal opportunities. We don't have to demand that there's equal outcomes. So some people would definitely do better than others because you perform according to your capabilities, but you all have an equal playing ground. So if you join in politics or you're going to serve, and that is your mindset, then you want to go from that viewpoint. Okay, and that's why you have, things like the sustainable development goals. This can be seen as a sort of like a translation of this broad approach to, where there are collective aspirations. There should be no poverty. There should be there's just a collective aspirations that we have in terms of creating equal valued opportunities on healthcare and education. Everybody should have access to healthcare, and then have security, and have education, and have access to this. If you don't go to school, don't perform, then and then you don't perform as you wish, that is your problem. Yeah. So this is the capabilities approach. Now if you look at yourself and your outlook to life and your sense of justice comes from the part of, well, I give them a chance. I teach them how to fish. I'm not supposed to give them fish. And that's your approach. All right. Now, people who align, like I said, the conservative, the Republican Party also in the US somewhat would align with this kind of approach. All right. And the focus essentially is to create an enabling environment for everybody to thrive. But how people perform would entirely be their responsibility and it's tied to their capabilities. All right. So that's essentially it. Now, the other one is the utilitarian approach. Now, this is originally formulated by an English philosopher called Jeremiah Bentham, right? and this introduces the concept of utility and or a measure of the usefulness or happiness that we gain from various aspects of living. Okay, now the goal of the society or the government is then to maximize total utility across all its members. So increase happiness, increase utility, rather than create equal opportunity. Just give everybody minimize as much pain, maximize as much pleasure. All right, how can we do that? That is, how can we achieve the greatest good for the greatest number? So this is it is essentially it. So it's sort of the point here is that if it's not about, if you can't so there's a lot of emphasis on the welfare state, screen that people are supported beyond their capabilities, and just throwing a lot of funds and support, and then the wealthier are taxed heavily to support those that are not as privileged in quotes. So the point is that it's not about equal opportunity. It's just about, let's ensure that the most people are happy. So the consequentialist approach, you sort of locates morality in the consequence of an act. Okay, so that's it. But then there is also the last approach, which I would talk on. There are a few others, but I'm just saying that this, identify where you align in all of these. And now this may look like a load of philosophical gibberish, but it's important. And I told you about laser thinking and determined thinking in order to serve our nations with all our strength, the might of the mind. We have to engage in, first of all, deeply reflecting on who we are and why we need change. That would now make us, that would shape the kind of political parties we have as a continent. That would shape, and then we can now have predictive discourse. We can have disagreement that are predictive based on our ideologies. No, PDP is never going to go for that. You're not going to vote for PDP because that is not their approach to the social palaver or APC. So where each party stands. When manifestos have a meaning and not just a bunch of words that you look at it from that standpoint. But the next approach is justice and fairness. So this grapples directly with issues known as justice and fairness. So what to do is that each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive total system of equal basic liberties that are compatible with a similar system of liberties for all. Okay, so what's central to this is what is called a difference principle. So what it means is that the inequality is justified only to the extent that it benefits the worst of. So it's positive discrimination in order to promote justice and fairness. Okay, these jobs are only available to women, even though you have men that are more qualified, but women are the most disadvantaged in this area. So that's our approach. It doesn't matter whether it's not about it, it's about fairness. It's not just about right. It's about fairness across board. So that's the approach. So is that how you approach it? Is that this approach is about how a society is fundamentally arranged in terms of ensuring that the basic liberties and access to political or other public positions for all, are determined by what is it going to make, what is the outcome going to be for the most disadvantaged in the society. Okay, so that is it. Understanding these things. There are various others, some other approaches which are philosophical as well. You have the Ubuntu approach, which is more African as well. You can look that up, which is really an approach of solidarity. And then, of course, you have a Kama approach, where you believe that the action that you do would produce either a good outcome or a negative outcome, depending on the kind of outcome. But overall, this concept are talking about how we see ourselves. And in all of these, when I send the slides later on, you would be able to identify who you are in these various frameworks. These are some commonalities of our approach to getting what I think we all want. So once we understand that, yeah, understanding that, they deal with decisions about who we are and various things. Once we understand that approach, then we can now go on to the next thing, which is, what do we need to change? So first of all, we've understood who we are, our outlook to life, our outlook to the society. Now we want to look at what the problem is. So this is where we'll pause and we'll come round, and this is gets a bit more practical now. We're now going to be looking at what how do we diagnose a problem? All right, how do we find out what exactly is the problem? Yes, there is no electricity, there's no power supply. Yes, we know that. Is that the problem? Is that just a symptom of a greater problem? Is that a symptom of a disease? What is, we faced with symptoms all around us? What exactly is the disease? How do we diagnose a solution to it?